Seriva Thorin stood on the highest balcony of the royal citadel and looked out over the world she loved. The sky of Illyriath shimmered in soft colors that shifted like quiet waves, and the tall crystal forests below reflected the glow of the twin moons. It was a beautiful world, filled with life and history. But tonight, Seriva did not feel proud or peaceful. She felt the same cold anger that every child of Illyriath learned from the day they were old enough to understand their lessons. Humans had once come to this world with promises of peace. They said they wanted friendship, exchange, a shared future. But their treaties had been lies. Within months of landing, they wanted rare crystals, control of airspace, and military bases. When the Illyrian Council refused, the humans launched bombardments from orbit. Whole cities turned to ash in seconds. Families vanished without graves. Every corner of Seriva's home carried scars of that war. Seriva had not been alive during the invasion, but she grew up with its memory. Her mother, the queen, still had burns across her arms where she had pulled soldiers from collapsing towers. Her teachers taught her that humans were not to be trusted, not to be reasoned with, not to be forgiven. When she was small, she once asked why humans had lied. Her mother answered with sadness, "Because some beings value only power." So Seriva swore to herself that she would never trust a human as long as she lived. Now she was 23, and the burden of leadership was beginning to fall on her. The queen was ill, and spoke less each day. The council argued loudly in every chamber, each elder repeating old wounds and seeking no new answers. And the worst part was that Illyriath now faced another enemy, one even more terrifying than humans. The machine swarm came from beyond known space. No one knew who built it, or why it consumed world after world. The first ships arrived without warning. They had no pilots, no diplomats, no voices at all. They simply started mining settlements, harvesting resources, and wiping out anyone who stood near them. Illyrian fleets tried to stop the swarm, but the machines adapted. Their armor changed to resist every new weapon. Their tactics evolved in hours. For every destroyed factory ship, they built 3 more. Citizens began to flee from the frontier regions. Refugee ships filled the skies. Seriva visited hospitals every day and saw people missing limbs, eyes full of terror, children who cried because they could not understand what was happening. She listened to their stories and felt something her mother had never taught her to accept: helplessness. The council met every day to find solutions, but all strategies ended the same way Illyriath was losing. For the first time in their long history, their proud armies could not protect their own territory. A few younger officers proposed looking beyond their borders. They said the swarm had attacked other species, perhaps even humans. They suggested that forming temporary alliances might give Illyriath a chance to survive. The council shouted them down. "We do not ask humans for help," one elder snapped, slamming his cane against the floor. "They destroyed our cities once. We will not invite them back to finish the job." Seriva understood the pain behind their voices. She felt it too. But she also knew that emotion could not defeat an enemy that learned faster than they could fight. Still, she said nothing. She was not queen yet, and her words would not change anything. That night, when she stood alone on the balcony, she wondered if she was simply watching her world die. Birds flew across the glowing horizon, unaware of everything happening. There was a soft breeze carrying the scent of crystal pollen, and for a moment it almost felt peaceful. But then, distant alarms began to sound. A line of warships was returning from the northern frontier, badly damaged. Only half of them made it home. Seriva clenched her hands on the railing. She could not stand doing nothing anymore. She turned away and walked through the halls of the citadel. Light panels reflected on polished floors, and armored guards saluted as she passed. She went straight to her mother's chambers. The queen lay in a bed surrounded by medical screens, her face pale but her eyes still sharp. When Sariva entered, the queen gestured for the doctors to leave. "You cannot sleep," the queen said quietly. "Your heart keeps you awake." Sariva sat beside her. "Mother, the swarm is getting closer. Our fleets are breaking. People are terrified. We must consider new options." "You mean humans." The queen's voice was tired, but it was not angry. It was simply sad. "Mother, we have enemies that no single world can stand alone against. If humans have fought them, if they know anything." The queen closed her eyes for a long moment, then opened them again. "Sariva, you know what they did to us. Army." "Yes," Sariva said, her voice shaking. "But this is not the same war. This time we may not survive without help." Her mother touched her hand. "Humans do not come to help. They come to take." Sariva looked away. She had always believed that too. Every story she had ever heard reinforced that truth. But when she had visited the hospitals, she had seen children who would never walk again, soldiers who would never fly again, and families who would never see their homes again. If the price of survival was asking for help, should they not at least try? Before she could ask another question, a shrill alarm echoed across the palace. A royal guard rushed in without knocking, bowed, and spoke rapidly. "Your Majesty, Your Highness, we have an incoming vessel in orbit. Identification code is Terran military." Sariva's blood ran cold. A Terran human warship had come. Her mother's expression hardened. "Prepare all defense batteries. We shoot them down if they move closer." The guard nodded and rushed out. Sariva stood completely still. A Terran vessel arriving now, when they had sent no call for help, could only mean one thing. Humans had detected their weakness. The swarm had wounded Illyriath, and humans had come for the final blow. Sariva felt her heart beat faster. Not from fear, but from rage. "There will be no negotiations," the queen said, sitting up despite her weakness. "We will show them that Illyriath still has teeth." Sariva looked out the window at the sky, where the faint glimmer of an approaching ship could be seen with the naked eye. In one moment, the memories of dead cities filled her mind, and she understood exactly what her people wanted. She swore silently that if humans had come to conquer Illyriath again, she would show them how wrong they were. What she did not know was that inside that Terran ship, a soldier had come not to take her world, but to save it. The Terran ship entered Illyrian orbit slowly, as if the humans inside understood that the entire world below considered them enemies. Every defense battery on the surface was locked onto the vessel. Thousands of soldiers waited with weapons armed. Civilians stood on rooftops and streets staring at the sky, afraid that history was about to repeat itself. When the humans came the first time, they had brought destruction. Now Illyriath wondered if the second arrival would be worse. Sariva remained beside the queen in the war chamber, watching the holographic display hover above the center table. The Terran vessel hovered in a neutral position, not descending, not powering weapons, simply waiting. The military captains whispered among themselves, trying to guess the enemy's strategy. A communication officer ran forward and bowed. "Your Majesty, the Terran ship is sending a message. They request a diplomatic contact and safe landing." The chamber exploded into angry voices. Some shouted to reject the request. Others demanded the ship be shot down. A few, mostly younger commanders, argued that they should listen before acting. Sariva stood silent while everyone else argued, but inside her chest she could feel her heart beating like a drum. She expected her mother to refuse immediately, but the queen surprised her. "Put the message through," the queen said. The room fell silent. Every officer turned toward the projection field as the hologram activated. A human face appeared. The man had short dark hair, a calm expression, and a uniform marked with Terran military insignia. His voice was steady and respectful. "This is Lieutenant Marcus Hale of the Terran Union. We come in peace. Your world sent emergency distress signals 3 days ago. We answered. Sariva's mother replied in a cold voice. Illyriath does not ask humans for assistance. Hale nodded slowly, as if he expected that answer. I understand. But the machine swarm does not care about borders or hatred. They destroyed 3 Terran colonies last year. If we fight separately, we both fall. If we stand together, we have a chance. His words were simple, but the chamber reacted as if he had insulted them. Some officers slammed their fists on tables. One shouted that the Terrans were using the war as an excuse to invade. Hale waited calmly until the noise faded. With respect, he continued, if we wanted to conquer Illyriath, we would not have sent one ship, and we would not have asked for permission to land. Sariva looked closely at the man's face. He did not look arrogant or hungry for power. He looked tired, like someone who had seen enough death to last a lifetime. But she had been trained to doubt every Terran word, no matter how gentle it sounded. Humans had lied before. Her mother leaned forward. We do not trust your promises, but we will hear your proposal. Come alone, with no weapons, and land under military escort. Any attempt at deception will be answered with force. Understood, Hale said. I will comply. The hologram vanished. Sariva took a small breath. She felt something she did not want to admit. Curiosity. This human soldier spoke differently from the stories she knew. But maybe humans always spoke well before betraying their allies. She would not forget that. Soon after, alarms announced that a small human shuttle was descending from the Terran ship. Thousands of Illyrian turrets tracked it as it approached the landing field. Ground troops formed rows, weapons raised, ready to fire if anything went wrong. The shuttle touched down quietly. A ramp lowered, and Lieutenant Marcus Hale stepped out alone. He wore standard battle armor, but had removed every weapon from his belt. Sariva watched from the balcony above the landing zone, alongside the Queen and several council members. Hale walked calmly across the field, while hundreds of alien eyes followed him with hatred and suspicion. He showed no fear, though he must have known that one wrong move could mean his death. He stopped before the royal platform and bowed with a soldier's precision. Thank you for granting me audience. The Queen looked down at him with steel in her eyes. Speak your purpose. Hale lifted a small holographic projector and activated it. A star map appeared, showing dozens of burning worlds. Sariva recognized some from old navigation charts. Others she had never seen. But all of them were marked with the same dark symbol of the swarm. This is not a war against one species, Hale explained. This is extinction. They are building weapons faster than any single government can respond. Terran Space lost 12 colonies in the last cycle. They eliminated fleets that took centuries to build. He tapped a control, and more images appeared, giant mechanical ships tearing through orbital defenses, ground cities falling to endless waves of spider-like machines, explosions lighting up entire continents. The Illyrian officers watching grew silent. It was not weakness they saw. It was a mirror of their own suffering. Hale switched to another projection showing technical data. Terran research has found that the swarm is controlled through a series of command cores. If we destroy enough, they cannot coordinate upgrades or tactics. But the swarm has already begun building new cores in this sector of space. The projection zoomed in until it showed Illyriath's star system. They are coming here next. Your long-range sensors already detected them. Several Illyrian commanders frowned. Their security reports had indeed mentioned strange signals at the system's edge, but no one had realized the threat was that close. The Queen narrowed her eyes. You want us to believe that you came to save us. Hale shook his head. I did not come to save you. I came because if Illyriath falls, the swarm will be twice as strong. Then humanity falls too. This is not charity. It is survival. Whoa. Sariva felt a small stir in her chest. He was honest. Brutally. Practically honest. He was not pretending to be noble. He was saying, we help each other. or we both die. She did not like his message, but she respected it. It made her uneasy. The Queen spoke again. You expect us to trust you after what your people did? Hale looked up at her with a quiet sadness. I expect nothing. I only offer help. The Terran Union of today is not the government that harmed Illyriath. That regime fell generations ago. Many Terrans died to bring it down. But I know words mean nothing without proof. So, 7. He took a slow breath. So, I am offering myself first. My team will not take a single step without your approval. If we break your laws, you have every right to remove us. The council whispered among themselves. Some were impressed. Most were suspicious. Sariva watched Hale closely. He stood relaxed but ready. A man who understood where he was, in the center of a world that hated him. Her mother gave the order that changed everything. You may stay, under guard, under constant surveillance, but the moment you betray us, there will be no mercy. Hale bowed. As he was escorted away by armed soldiers, Sariva remained on the balcony. She could not stop thinking about the way he had spoken, direct, measured, not arrogant. A human who risked landing alone on a hostile world either had great courage or great foolishness. Sariva could not decide which he possessed. Later that night, she returned to her chambers, but rest did not come. She kept replaying the meeting in her mind. She had expected threats, demanding tones, or hidden schemes. Instead, she found a soldier who spoke like someone tired of endless war, someone who did not want enemies, but would fight anyway if pushed. She sat near her window and looked toward the sky where the Terran ship still hovered. Illyriath had always believed humans were the greatest threat to their existence. But now a new enemy was coming, one that did not hate, did not speak, did not negotiate. The swarm wanted only to destroy and build, forever. For the first time, Sariva wondered if her people were ready for what was coming, and whether this human soldier, this Marcus Hale, might be part of the answer they did not want to face. She closed her eyes and tried to calm her thoughts, but one thought kept returning. If this human was lying, Illyriath might fall, but if he was telling the truth, they might need him more than anyone was willing to admit. Marcus Hale did not expect a warm welcome, and he did not get one. Soldiers watched his every move. Guards followed him in silence, and technicians carefully scanned his equipment, as if expecting hidden traps. Hale understood. He would have done the same if he were in their place. Trust was not given on Illyriath. It had to be earned, and humans had a long debt to repay. He was allowed to set up a temporary operations room inside a storage hangar. His team, only 6 Terran specialists, arrived next. They looked around with tired eyes but kept disciplined faces. They had seen the swarm destroy many worlds, and they knew Illyriath might be next if they failed. Sariva visited the hangar the next morning with 3 guards. She paused at the entrance, surprised by the calmness inside. Hale and his team were not celebrating or relaxing. They were working. Maps were spread across tables, monitors streamed tactical data, and holographic models transformed the space into a war planning center. Hale noticed her and stood straight. Your Highness, Sariva walked in slowly. We have allowed you to stay. That does not mean we have accepted your words. I understand, Hale said simply. Sariva looked at the equipment. Your technology is different from ours, and yours is ahead of ours in certain areas, Hale replied. That is why cooperation may help. Sariva did not answer. She had not come to discuss strategy. She came to observe him. She wanted to know if he spoke with sincerity or practiced diplomacy. For now, she could not tell. A sharp alarm rang through the hangar, and Hale turned to the main monitor. Sariva stepped closer as the image shifted to a forward defense post on the mountain ridges. Grainy visuals showed bright flashes in the sky, then dozens of metallic forms descending. Even in the blurry camera feed, the sight made Sariva's heart tighten. The swarm is here, Hale said quietly. Sariva's communicator chimed, and a commander's voice spoke rapidly. The machines were attacking outposts along the northern frontier. Illyrian fighters had been scrambled. Battle had begun. Sariva immediately headed for the command center, but Hale spoke before she left. Permission to assist with tactical support. She paused. The easiest answer was no. But refusing help during an active attack would be irresponsible. She nodded once. Follow me. They moved quickly through the palace corridors. Guards joined them, and the noise of distant alarms filled the air. When they entered the war chamber, the holographic table was already displaying real-time battle coverage. Illyrian fleets were in motion, firing defensive energy beams as the swarm ships descended with frightening efficiency. Sariva watched as their frontline squadrons engaged. Illyrian ships were fast and agile, but the swarm adapted mid-battle. Every destroyed machine led to the next one, adjusting attack patterns. Sariva saw 3 fighter wings break formation under pressure. It was not panic, just the overwhelming pace of the enemy's evolution. Hale stood at the edge of the table, analyzing silently. The Queen's condition did not allow her to attend, so Sariva was acting in her place. Commanders waited for orders, eyes filled with fear they tried to hide. Sariva spoke firmly. Reinforce the northern line. Keep the capital shield reactors stable, no matter what. A blow to their reactors meant certain defeat. Hale finally stepped forward. May I suggest something? The council members stiffened, but Sariva gestured for him to continue. The swarm is using adaptive strike cycles. They are targeting your speed and formation structure. If you switch to staggered waves and force them to divide fire control, they will lose harmonic targeting for a short time. The senior commander frowned. How do you know this? Because the swarm used the same pattern against us, Hale answered. We made the same mistake before learning to break their rhythm. Sariva could see doubt in her officer's eyes. They had never accepted advice from a human. But their fleets were already being forced back. And continuing the same plan might lead to defeat. She turned to her commander. Send the adjustment. 3 wave patterns. Use speed variation to confuse their tracking. The commander hesitated, then obeyed. The effect was almost immediate. Illyrian ships switched tactics, moving in layered formation instead of a single, unified front. The swarm's return fire became less focused. For the first time in the battle, the Illyrian fleets held ground without losing ships. Hale did not smile. He simply said, Good. Sariva exhaled slowly. She knew this battle was only beginning, but they had bought a few breaths of time. Suddenly, a new alert flashed on the map. A ground unit positioned near a mountain fortress sent a distress signal. The swarm had broken through defenses and landed assault machines on the surface. Illyrian ground forces responded, but the machines were overwhelming them. Sariva looked at the location and recognized it instantly. The fortress held ancient shield generators, protecting key civilian evacuation routes. If it fell, thousands might be exposed. She moved toward the exit. I am going to the fortress. I will lead reinforcement troops. Hale spoke firmly. I am going with you. Sariva turned sharply. You are a guest under guard, Lieutenant, not a commander of Illyrian soldiers. Hale met her gaze without blinking. I know, but I have fought the swarm on the ground. I know their tactics. If we are too slow, they will secure the entry points, and then no reinforcement will matter. One of the council members snapped. We do not need a human to teach us battle. Sariva said nothing for a long moment. She did not want to accept his help, but lives were at stake, and she could not make decisions based on old hatred. She finally nodded. You will come, but you follow every command given. Understood, Hale replied. Minutes later, dropships lifted off from the palace platforms. Sariva stood at the front of the lead vessel, armored and ready. Hale sat across from her, strapping in. Illyrian soldiers stared at him with open suspicion. Hale ignored it. The dropship cut through the clouds, engines roaring. The landing zone came into view, a burning mountain slope, where Illyrian troops were pinned behind defensive barriers, surrounded by advancing mechanical walkers. Explosions flashed across the ridge, and the fortress's main gates trembled under constant pressure. Sariva's dropship touched down in a clearing. She stepped out without hesitation, energy rifle ready. Hale followed beside her, scanning the enemy formations. Sariva led her troops forward, shouting orders that pushed fear away and focused the soldiers' minds. Hale pointed to the enemy units moving toward the side entrance. They are trying to flank. If they reach that entry, the inner corridors will fall. Sariva turned to her nearest officer. Take 2 squads and reinforce the side entrance immediately. The officer obeyed, and the soldiers rushed into position. Then Hale saw something else. Above the fortress, small shapes streaked downward, new swarm drones deploying in quick succession. They would break the second line if not intercepted. Hale tapped his communicator. We need aerial cover, now. Illyrian commanders hesitated. Hale was not part of their command structure. Sariva gave the authorization herself. Grant his request. CC. Grant his request. Grant his request. Within moments, Illyrian fighters swooped down, blasting the drones before they could land. The pressure on the ground eased. The fortress shields held. But the machines were not done. They adjusted again, shifting patterns and trying new angles of attack. The battle lasted long and pushed every defender to their limit. Hale and Sariva fought side by side through ruined walkways and smoke-filled trenches. He covered soldiers pulling back to safer positions. She led charges that pushed the machines away from the fortress gates. Despite the chaos, Hale showed discipline and focus. He gave suggestions only when needed and never challenged Sariva's authority. Her soldiers saw it too. Some of their distrust turned into quiet respect. Finally, after hours of struggle, the swarm units pulled back. The remaining machines retreated toward the mountains and then lifted into the sky, disappearing as fast as they had arrived. Silence settled over the battlefield, broken only by the sound of engineers checking equipment and medical teams tending to the injured. Sariva stood on the fortress ramparts and looked at the horizon. Smoke rose in the distance, but Illyriath had held its line. She turned toward Marcus Hale, who stood wiping dust from his armor. You said the swarm would not stop, she said quietly. They never stop, Hale replied. Not until they are destroyed at the source. She looked at him for a long moment. He had proven something tonight, not with speeches, but through his actions. He had risked his life for a world that did not welcome him. He had offered knowledge without expecting praise, and he had kept his word. Sariva found herself facing a new uncertainty. She could no longer say that all humans were the same. The soldier standing before her did not fit the stories she had been raised with. The war was far from over. But tonight, for the first time, Illyriath had not fought alone. The battle at the mountain fortress changed something in Illyriath, though no one said it out loud. Soldiers who once stared at Marcus Hale with suspicion now gave him small nods of respect. Officers who expected him to fail now studied the tactics he suggested. Even Sariva, who had sworn never to trust a human, found herself asking questions she would never have asked a week ago. That night, after the wounded were taken care of and the fortress secured, Sariva returned to the capital. The palace corridors were quiet, filled with the soft hum of energy lights. She removed her armor and washed the dust from her face, but she did not rest. Her mind was heavier than her body. She thought of Hale stepping in front of enemy fire to drag wounded Illyrian soldiers to safety. She remembered how he split his small team to support their defense rather than protect themselves. She had seen humans in historical records, but never one standing in the dirt and smoke, bleeding to defend people who did not trust him. For the first time, Sariva wondered if she truly understood her enemy. She went to the royal medical wing to check on her mother. The queen slept quietly, her breathing shallow. A healer bowed and whispered, "Her strength is failing. Too many years of worry, Your Highness." Sariva stood beside the bed. She took her mother's hand and squeezed it gently. "Mother, everything you taught me may be tested soon," she whispered. "I do not know if I am ready." The queen did not wake. Sariva left quietly and walked down the long hall toward the archives. If the old stories had shaped her beliefs, then she needed to see the truth for herself. The Illyrian archives were a vast chamber of crystal shelves holding centuries of records. Only royal family members and high-ranking scholars could access restricted sections. Sariva walked through the glowing data aisles until she reached the sealed historical sector. She pressed her hand to a scanner. The doors opened, revealing old recordings, political transmissions, diplomatic logs, and testimony from survivors of the human invasion. She sat at a console and called up the first records from the start of the war. Holograms filled the air, showing burning cities, orbital bombardment, and desperate pleas for mercy. Her chest tightened. This was the pain she had grown up hearing about. Families crying, leaders begging for negotiation, and human warships ignoring every plea. She watched the attacks play out again, centuries old but still alive in the memories of her people. She could not blame anyone for hating humans after seeing these images. But then she opened later, files messages that had never been part of her lessons. There were transmissions sent by human leaders after the war, declaring their old regime removed and a new government formed. They apologized for the atrocities and offered reparations, medical support, and peace treaties. They tried again and again to re-establish contact. Those messages had been received by Illyriath, but they were never answered. Sariva's eyes narrowed. She pulled up internal military council logs and found records of discussions. Some Illyrian leaders, long ago, had argued that accepting human diplomacy would weaken their political control. Others said that even if humans were sincere, the people would not forgive, and the government would collapse under anger and distrust. So they kept the messages hidden. Illyriath closed its borders completely and raised generations in silence and fear. Sariva leaned back in her chair, stunned. She had never known this part of history. What she had believed all her life was still true. The humans had caused terrible harm, but she had never been told that humans had tried to make amends afterward. She stared at the dark console screen, feeling a chill run through her. The truth was not simple. It was not clean. It was a history of wounds on both sides, and no one had ever taken the first step toward healing. Her communicator vibrated. Hale's voice came through. "Your Highness, I would like to request a private discussion at your earliest convenience." Sariva hesitated, then answered. "Meet me in the central garden in 1 hour." When she arrived, the palace garden was quiet. Crystal flowers glowed softly in the moonlight. Hale stood near a small fountain, waiting with the calm posture of a trained soldier. She approached him slowly, her expression unreadable. "I assume you did not call me here to talk about tactics," she said. "No," Hale replied. "After today's battle, I realized something. You needed to know why we kept fighting the swarm alone before coming here." Sariva folded her arms. "Explain." Hale looked at the stars above them as he spoke. "My people have changed. We used to be a government that believed strength was the only truth. Eventually, that government turned on its own worlds. Billions died. The survivors fought back and built a new union, one that values cooperation instead of domination." Sariva listened without interrupting. Hale continued. "But the galaxy did not know we had changed. Most species shut their borders or never answered our messages. Some still saw us as the old empire that destroyed everything." Sariva exhaled slowly. Illyriath did the same. Hale nodded. "I guessed as much. I do not blame anyone. Pain makes strong walls. But walls can become cages." Sariva looked down at the fountain ripples, His words were simple, but they reached deep. She decided to speak something she had never said aloud. My people were taught that humans cannot be trusted, that you always hide darker intentions beneath polite words, that you come offering help only so you can control later. Hale did not argue. Once, that was true. It is our burden to prove otherwise, and we know trust takes time. Sariva considered him for a long moment. She had seen him fight, bleed, and save lives without hesitation. She had read records that showed humans had tried to repair what their ancestors destroyed. She had discovered that her own leaders had prevented peace out of fear. Something inside her shifted. "What do you want, Marcus Hale?" she asked quietly. Not as a soldier, as a man. He met her gaze without hesitation. "I want the swarm destroyed before it consumes every world. And I want Illyriath to stand with us, not as subjects, not as conquests, but as allies." She had expected a more complicated answer. His honesty was disarming. Before she could answer, a guard ran into the garden, breathless. "Your Highness, urgent message from the Northern Fleet. They found something." Sariva straightened. What did they find? A swarm command corps, on one of the outer moons. Hale's eyes sharpened. "If that is true, then we have a real chance. Destroying a command corps will slow the entire swarm." The guard handed Sariva a datapad. She scanned the footage satellite images of a massive machine structure built beneath the moon's surface, surrounded by heavy defenses. Hale stepped forward. "We need a joint strike. Your forces and mine together. It will be dangerous, but if we succeed, you will see the swarm break." Sariva looked at him, the moonlight reflecting in her eyes. She knew the council would object. They would say that humans were using this as an excuse to gain military position. They would push her to refuse. But she had seen enough. If they kept fighting alone, Illyriath would fall. And if she let old hatred guide her again, she would be no better than the leaders who hid the truth before. "I will bring this mission to the council in the morning," she said. Hale nodded respectfully. "Whatever their decision, I will support it." Sariva turned to leave, but then paused. "Lieutenant," she said softly, "you have changed more here in 2 days than any diplomat has in centuries. The council may not trust you yet, but I am beginning to." Hale did not smile, but there was relief in his eyes. "That is enough." Sariva walked back toward the palace, her steps calm but her heart racing. She knew that tomorrow would not just be another strategy meeting. Tomorrow, the future of 2 worlds would be decided. Marcus Hale woke slowly, his body heavy and full of pain. The world around him was dull and blurred at the edges, full of smoke, dust, and distant echoes of battle. He was lying on cold metal, the floor of the machine command chamber. He tried to sit up, but the sharp pain in his ribs and legs stopped him. His armor was broken in several places, and he could feel blood drying against his skin. He had pushed himself beyond his limits, and his body was paying the price. Sariva stood a few steps away, her eyes still fixed on the control node in front of her. The huge machine core, glowing with sick blue light only moments ago, was dying. The weapon she had deployed a desperate energy override was now spreading through the machine network across the entire planet. The humming sound faded, and the bright tendrils of artificial energy across the walls dimmed one by one. The machine swarm was shutting down. The enemy was defeated. Sariva lowered her weapon slowly, her hands trembling. She had expected victory to feel different. Maybe lighter. Maybe peaceful. Instead, she felt a deep ache inside her chest, because even in victory she heard the sound of her people dying, ships falling, lives lost. But she also saw one human soldier lying broken on the floor who had chosen to stay and fight for a world that was not his. She turned to him and walked forward quickly, her armor crackling with small sparks where the battle had damaged the plates. She knelt beside him and touched his shoulder gently. "You should not move," she said, her voice unable to stay calm. "You are injured." Marcus laughed weakly. Noticed that? He whispered. Sariva pressed her hand against a bleeding wound on his side, trying to slow the blood. She had grown up hearing stories of humans as monsters, invaders, and destroyers. She had been taught never to trust them. But here was a human who had risked everything without expecting anything in return. He had fought not for land, money, or power, but simply because he believed no world deserved to fall alone. Outside the chamber, the final explosions of the machine structures faded. The battle was ending. You kept your promise, Sariva whispered. Marcus exhaled slowly, his breath shaky. Told you. We came to help. He laughed again, but it was a tired, painful sound. Sariva swallowed hard, her heart tight. Why? She asked softly. Why do this for my people? After what happened in the past? Marcus looked at her with tired but honest eyes. Because your past wasn't my future, he said. We changed, and we wanted a chance to prove it. Sariva had no answer. The truth was heavy and painful. Her world had locked itself away, holding on to anger for so long that they had never seen the possibility that humans had grown too. She leaned close, helping him sit up a little, even though he winced at the movement. The command chamber doors slid open, and several Illyriath warriors ran in, weapons drawn. They stopped when they saw Sariva tending to the human. Confusion spread across their faces. One of the generals stepped forward. Princess, the swarm has fallen silent across the planet. We have won. We have won. We have won. We have won. Sariva nodded. At a great cost, she replied. Make sure the wounded are taken care of, everyone. Our people and the Terran troops. The soldiers looked shocked. Their princess was ordering care for humans. But none of them argued. The war had changed more than just battlefield lines. Medics rushed toward Marcus, and Sariva stood up slowly. One medic began scanning his injuries. He needs immediate surgery, the medic said. If we do not treat him soon, he will not survive. Sariva pressed her hand gently on Marcus's. You will survive, she said firmly, as if her voice alone could force fate to obey. Marcus smiled. I'll try, he murmured, before the medics lifted him onto a stretcher and carried him out. Sariva followed them outside the ruined chamber. The sky above Illyriath was full of black clouds from burning wreckage, but she could see the first sunlight breaking through. It felt symbolic. A world cut off by anger, now letting the light in again. Days passed. Illyriath cities began to repair themselves. The machine swarm lay silent in towers of metal and debris. Fires were put out. Wounded, treated, and broken families reunited. Humans and Illyriath soldiers found themselves working side by side in rescue and rebuilding efforts. At first, many citizens were hesitant, half afraid and half suspicious. But as Terran soldiers lifted rubble from trapped civilians, carried children to safety, and brought medicine where needed, the fear slowly changed into something else. Curiosity. Sariva spent most of her time overseeing relief work, but every few hours, she visited the medical ward where Marcus Hale was recovering. He had survived the surgery. And although he was weak, he was awake and improving. Each time she entered, he tried to sit up or salute, and every time she forced him to lie back down. One afternoon, as she stood beside his bed, Marcus looked up at her with a small grin. So, princess, still hate humans? She crossed her arms, pretending to look offended. I never said I hated all humans. He raised an eyebrow. Pretty sure you did. 12. Pretty sure you did. 12. She allowed a small laugh. Maybe I said it once or twice. Once or twice. Marcus coughed. That's generous. She sat down and looked at him carefully. I was wrong. I judged an entire people for the sins of a broken past. I closed my world off so tightly that I never saw what had changed outside our borders. Marcus's expression softened. You had good reason. I don't blame you. Sariva shook her head. But I still needed to learn. And I did. Because of you. Silence settled between them for a moment. It was a comfortable silence, filled with understanding rather than distance. Marcus looked thoughtful. So what happens now? Sariva stood and looked out a nearby window at the damaged but living city beyond. Now, we rebuild. And this time, not alone. The next day, Sariva stood before a vast crowd in the capital square. Many Illyriath citizens, soldiers, technicians, and survivors gathered below the balcony. Terran soldiers stood among them, unsure if they were welcome, but they remained respectful. Sariva took a deep breath. Her voice needed to carry not only to her people, but to history. My people, she began. We have survived destruction not once, but twice. The past left deep wounds in our hearts, and we carried those wounds as armor. We believed the universe had only enemies for us. Today, we learned we were wrong. The crowd murmured. She continued. When the machines attacked and our world began to fall, one group answered the call: humans. Not the humans who hurt us in the past, but those who wished to change the future. One of them nearly gave his life to save our world. She paused, her voice strengthening. A human saved us. The words echoed through the square. Many people looked stunned, some emotional. Terran soldiers stood frozen, unable to believe they were hearing praise in a city that once hated them. A new alliance begins today, Sariva said. One built not on fear, but on trust earned in battle, sacrifice, and courage. We rebuild Illyriath together with new friends. When she finished, the crowd erupted, not in anger, but in applause. Hope, after decades of isolation, had returned. Far from the balcony, Marcus Hale lay in his recovery bed, listening to the broadcast live. He smiled weakly, closed his eyes, and let the weight of victory settle over him. Humanity had finally earned forgiveness. Illyriath had opened its gates, and the galaxy, once divided by old scars, took its first steps toward a new future, one made stronger because, when it mattered most, they fought side by side.